a key turning point, a triumph of quality game development, kind of wake-up call for companies. But I'm here to put an end to this party. AAA games are now commanding budgets greater than Marvel movies. They don't just want some of the money, they want all of the money. And this reality is where microtransactions come into the equation. Nowadays, you can't escape talk of Baldurs Gate 3 as the new industry standard in the gaming media space. Every gaming website and YouTube channel is proclaiming its tremendous success as a key turning point, a triumph of quality game development over formulaic features and in-game transactions. Even IGN has jumped on the bandwagon. It's assumed that its tremendous financial success would act as a kind of wake-up call for companies primarily focused on monetizing their user base. Because of course, why would game companies need to make 100 skins if they could rely on developing sophisticated and complex story-driven content to bring in the big bucks? But I'm here to put an end to this party and say that this take fundamentally misses the point and fails to explain why microtransactions emerged in the first place and why they will continue to exert their parasitic influence. They didn't suddenly emerge because gaming companies couldn't make a standard return on investment in a quality RPG or action game or so on and so forth. They emerged for two main reasons: the tremendous cost of game development and the inherent greed of the industry. Now I'll start with the cost. It might seem as though creating a masterpiece is just a matter of swearing against the evils of microtransactions, but the gaming process is exceptionally complicated and costly, with each stage carrying tremendous financial risk. Producing a game involves a complex three-step process of pre-production, production, and post-production. And the cost of each step has reached such an extreme extent that AAA games are now commanding budgets greater than Marvel movies. Red Dead Redemption 2 cost somewhere between $370 and $540 million. And Baldurs Gate 3 most likely ranges into the 100 million plus category. So it's not really a surprise that such a tremendously costly and difficult production process would lead to a vast history of game companies who had initially produced commercially successful and critically acclaimed titles falling into bankruptcy. Telltale is the perfect example of a beloved publisher who virtually collapsed after a string of bad games. But we even don't need to rely on anecdotes. This is the number of studio closures from 2006 to 2012, only 6 years. Now you might be asking, what does this even mean? It means that under capitalism, there is a trade-off between creating mediocre, reliable, and cheap products and financial security. Sometimes companies feel as though they have to stack the cash for a time when business isn't booming. But let's ignore this. Let's assume that this wasn't the case and games could be made without any microtransactions. They would still exist, for the simple reason that under capitalism, companies are expansionary. Game companies aren't just interested in making a profit. They don't just want some of the money, they want all of the money. Just think of companies as gym bros. Their life is a constant and unnecessary race to gain mass. Do they need 50 pounds of excess muscle to stay healthy? No, but they have a ravenous urge to gain it nonetheless. In the same regard, managers are hired to push growth as a priority regardless of current profitability. Now, what does this mean? It means that increasing revenue and profitability by any means possible becomes the standard. And this reality is where microtransactions come into the equation. You see, selling games and expansions and nothing else just doesn't cut the cake. The CEOs and senior managers in the game industry aren't stupid. Not saying they're smart either, but they pack every game full of microtransactions for a reason. It's where the money's at. The reality is, the biggest IP and studios are rife with microtransactions. Think of your Overwatches or your CODs or your GTAs. You might think they're just catering to a bunch of unsophisticated kids. Yes, and that's why they make so much money. The possibly stolen credit card fueled microtransactions in these games make up 30% of the global industries. Just selling quality releases free of microtransactions just doesn't cut it. Just look at Microsoft's recent acquisition spree. They spent $7.5 billion on acquiring Bethesda's parent company, ZeniMax Media. Whereas how much was their latest bid for Activision Blizzard? $75 billion. It doesn't even come close. ZeniMax's studios have created some of the greatest RPGs in gaming history, not to mention one of the greatest shooters of all time, Doom. And yet all these properties are only worth a fraction of a company responsible for creating the same Call of Duty game every single year. So if you're serious about restoring the greatness of the game industry to its previous microtransaction-less glory, fight against the regulatory bodies enabling microtransactions, not the devs or even the companies. Until changes are made, Baldurs Gate will never be the gold standard for the industry.